January 13th, 1982, 2:30 p.m. A heavy snow has grounded flights at Washington National Airport. Among them is Air Florida Flight 90, bound for Fort Lauderdale. It sits at the gate. The pilot calls a stop to the de-icing of his aircraft until the runway is reopened. The snow and cold temperatures are caused by a nor'easter.
When you have a nor'easter, what will happen is the temperature will actually fall during the day. So the temperature fell as the snow got a little heavier in the mid to late afternoon.
In response to the storm, many government offices and businesses close, and the evening rush hour gets off to an early start. Among the commuters is Roger OLIAN, a sheet metal worker at St. Elizabeth's Hospital. Before getting on the road, OLIAN calls his wife and tells her she too should leave work and go home early.
I advised her, I said, look, if they don't let you out pretty soon, just go home, because this is getting really, really bad, and if you don't leave soon, you're going to be spending hours and hours on the road.
Congressional Budget Office employee LENNY SKUTNIK also leaves work and soon gets stuck in traffic.
The federal government shut down, and we left early. And I was riding in a carpool. And we left the building probably 2:30 and didn't make it to the 14th Street Bridge until right around 4 o'clock.
One government office, the U.S. Park Police, does stay open. But Chief Helicopter Pilot Don Usher and Rescue Technician Gene Windsor assume they too will go home.
Don and I decided that we weren't flying that day because of the weather. That it was still snowing was taken into account as being very dangerous for us. And it was snowing hard.
It was about as lousy as you could get for a helicopter, a very, very snowy day. It was pretty miserable, low ceilings, bad visibility. We decided to hang on for a while, at least get through rush hour and see what the snow did.
2:45 p.m. at Washington National Airport. The runway is plowed and sanded, so air traffic controllers announce that flights will resume. The captain of Air Florida Flight 90 asks the ground crew to restart the de-icing of his aircraft. When the runway was first closed, ground crews had sprayed a mixture of heated water and ethylene glycol on half of the plane. Now the crews start all over, spraying the Boeing 737 with the de-icing solution. Once the wings are clear, the solution helps keep falling snow from sticking to the plane.
The de-icing process is relatively simple and straightforward. It's the heat that starts breaking up the process, and the force of the spray blows the residual ice and snow off the wing.
The weather on this day is so nasty that passenger Joe Stiley can barely see out the windows of the plane, even after the pilot ordered the de-icing.
By the time he had cleaned it up, you could see out one window, but by the time he cleaned up the other side, the first window had fogged back up and was kind of slushy again.
By 3:15 p.m., the de-icing is completed, but the de-icing fluid left the ground slick, so there's not enough traction for the plane to pull away from the gate. The pilot uses the plane's reverse thrusts to try to back out.
Essentially, you can put the plane in reverse and back it out of the gate. It is not a particularly unusual procedure for an airplane to try and back out by going into reverse thrust. I mean, it's certainly been done.
The crew did put the engines in reverse at the gate, which is permissible under some situation. They shouldn't have done it with the ice and snow.
Passenger Joe Stiley is a seasoned traveler who also has a pilot's license and is aware of the potential danger.
What I was curious about was how much snow and ice was he sucking into those engines and the process.
That may have thrown more ice and snow onto the aircraft. This obviously was an ice and snow issue.
But even the reverse thrust doesn't move the plane. Finally, an airport tug is able to push the plane back from the gate. The 737 taxis toward the runway and gets in line for takeoff.
It's inevitable the lines build up, particularly during rush hours. And in a storm like this, sure, there was a backup. Now, the backup then, the longer it gets, the longer it has been since you've been visited by the de-icing truck.
3:38 p.m. It's been more than a half hour since the plane was de-iced. The Air Florida jet is 16th in line for takeoff, and the snow is still coming down hard.
I mean, it was snowing like the very devil. I mean, there isn't any question about that. And it was coming down fast, and it was sticking. It was sub-freezing. This was a big deal snowstorm.
Flight 90 is now almost an hour and a half behind schedule. If the pilots go back to get another de-icing treatment, they will lose their place in line for takeoff. They decide not to go back for additional de-icing. They pull up close behind the plane in front of them.
The assumption being that the warm air from the engines would tend to de-ice the airplane or keep it from icing up. It's a pretty false assumption in the sense that the heat from the engine may melt the ice or turn it to liquid, and it may freeze again as soon as the heat comes off.
3:59 p.m. The Air Florida jet makes it to the front of the line.
But they sat for 50 minutes with ice accumulating on the airplane.
As the airplane sits, the temperature remains a sub-freezing 24 degrees.
That becomes critical for some of the chemicals that are used to de-ice the wings. And they sat back on the tarmac, and the ice built back up again.
Snow was continuing to perhaps gather on the aircraft, on the wings, on the fuselage, and snow and ice on wings and fuselage significantly degrade the ability of a plane to take off.
Air Florida Flight 90, with the call sign Palm 90, gets the all clear from the control tower.
Palm 90, clear for takeoff. 90, clear for takeoff.
The jet lumbers down the runway. For passenger Joe Stiley, it doesn't feel right. The plane is moving far too slowly, and he is now certain something is horribly wrong.
I became alarmed almost immediately. I felt like we were maybe half the speed that we might normally be. And it was bumpy. I expected the guy to pull off his throttles and abort the takeoff. It didn't happen, and I said, we're in deep trouble.
Coming up next on When Weather Changed History.